of power of the bombs used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki have been used on Gaza. I wanted to ask what these 6 months have meant for your family and friends in Gaza. You are from there, and about a report that you all put out, a report that Euromed Monitor put out about killing starving Palestinians, targeting aid trucks, etc.
Basically, by now, every single person I know in Gaza was exposed to the scene of decomposing bodies. And virtually everyone I know heard the noises of their neighbors, friends, down from underneath the rubble, and they couldn't do anything about it. It's even too dangerous to try to rescue people. And everybody I know, at least almost everyone in my family, had their homes bombed. It expands to my circle of friends. At my work with Euromed Monitor, we lost at least 5 team members. One of our team members found his mother executed at Al-Shifa hospital. He saw her decomposing bodies lying there on the ground. And it's not just the mass killing that is the problem. It's the deliberate, intentional targeting of civilians, the complete disregard for human life that we're seeing on full display. And the cruelty of the killing itself. We see bodies flattened by Israeli tanks,
and this has been going on in Africa,
turned into mush, crushed by Israeli tanks and armored vehicles. We see people hacked into pieces by Israeli missiles and shells. And we see people having their arms bound, their eyes blindfolded, and then executed, especially at Al-Shifa hospital. So the nature, the cruelty of the killing is very striking in that sense, especially that it's very open. They're not even trying to hide it.
Woo!
And that it's incredibly underreported on. It doesn't make it to any mainstream media, basically.
Oh!
The other dimension that we see there is the amount of people, the hidden iceberg of about 70,000 to 80,000 people who have been maimed or burned severely or wounded critically without basically any appropriate medical treatment,
wow,
or the possibility to go out of Gaza and seek medical treatment.
This is 2024.
At the moment, it's only very minor numbers of people that are allowed outside Gaza
75
to get medical treatment. And hospitals in Gaza, the majority of them have been fully compromised by Israel, surgically, one after the other, in broad daylight, without any sort of condemnation from the U.S. or the European Union.
Listen.
We see also the mass destruction, as you alluded, twice the amount of bombs that were used in Hiroshima. There's an estimate that it's about 70,000 tons of bombs that were dropped on Gaza.
Woo!
And we recently see Israeli officials admitting in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz saying that
we
could have achieved the same military objectives with about 10% of the damage. But, quote, cruelty was the point. There's an attempt to make a message here. There's also the unethical, extremely insane use of artificial intelligence in targeting people. There's also the very bizarre notion that the Israeli soldiers or Israeli troops, commanders, they set up virtual, quote, extermination areas in Gaza. Any person that crosses that area or happens to be in that area is executed at the spot or detained and tortured at the Sidi Taiman Israeli military base, where thousands of Palestinians are being held at that black spot away from any sort of legal purview without being charged or put on trial. And they are subjected to daily torture in every sense of the word in the most unimaginable ways possible. They're being electrocuted, burned with cigarettes, urinated upon, spat upon. They have their arms and legs tied at all times. They are forced to squat down and sit blindfolded, tied again, arms and legs for weeks.
This is Israel hell?
They are sleep deprived. If they try to sleep or speak to one another, they get beaten up by soldiers immediately. And we recently saw a report from Israeli doctors last week in Haaretz again. One dissenting doctor wrote a letter to Israeli ministers warning that we're all complicit in grave violations of the law, because Palestinian detainees or even political hostages at this point, they are mass arrested as a bargaining chip, therefore political prisoners or hostages. Some of them are routinely, quote, having their legs amputated with wounds of being handcuffed.
Like they used to do black people in slavery days?
For weeks and weeks and months. And then there is the last dimension of the engineered systematic starvation throughout Gaza, but most prominently and most severely in the north. Whereas, as Dr. Mustafa said earlier, we have about 500,000 to 700,000 people stuck in the north of Gaza, refusing to leave. Israel is continuing a process of ethnic cleansing in the north up until now. They continue to drop leaflets on people, telling them to move south if they want food, if they want safety, although the south is just as ravaged and compromised and devastated as the north. And we see Israel not just preventing aid from going to the north, but targeting anybody, literally anybody, that tries to secure the aid trucks coming through, prevent looting, and ensure fair distribution. Around the time that Israel invaded Al-Shifa, in fact, one of the reasons why they invaded Al-Shifa is the civil government in Gaza was operating from there after virtually all government facilities around the north of Gaza were destroyed and razed. They had only Al-Shifa to operate from there because there was electricity and access to people, and they can organize from there an emergency committee that can be in charge of securing the delivery of aid and its fair distribution. It worked out on the 16th and 17th of March very well. That was the first time since the war started, in about 170 days at the time, that aid made it all the way to Jabalia and was distributed to people without any disruption, without any looting, without any chaos. The day after, on Monday, that's when Israel started invading Al-Shifa and targeted assassinations against key figures that were responsible for securing the aid. So we see this very deliberate, very engineered starvation process of people in northern Gaza,
backed by the British and America,
and force them out,
mighty military
but also
force
to sustain chaos
deployed by Joe Biden
to
himself,
sustain the loss of civil order, and to bring about a societal collapse in whole or in part, to push it to the deepest conscience of people in Gaza, to the deepest of their minds, the idea of leaving, that it should be their only ticket to survival, to achieve the Israeli goal of population transfer, what they refer to as thinning the population. They call it voluntary migration, but in fact it's ethnic cleansing. And we see that process on full display.
Genocide.
And we see a very systematic, deliberate, conscious effort to make Gaza uninhabitable for decades to come.
Right.
Before we end, Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, I wanted to ask you about one of the most prominent Palestinian prisoners who has been jailed. He's died from cancer in an Israeli prison. The novelist Walid Daqqa had spent the past 38 years locked up for his involvement with an armed group that abducted and killed an Israeli soldier in 1984. Rights groups have been pressuring Israel to release him, saying he was in dire need of medical attention. Last month, Amnesty International called for his release, saying that since October 7th, he'd been tortured, humiliated, and denied family visits. Can you tell us about Walid Daqqa and the effect of his death in prison?
Well, Walid Daqqa is the 14th prisoner who dies in jail in Israeli prisons since 7th of October. The 13 others were beaten to death. In this case, Walid died because of cancer. But Walid Daqqa suffered from medical negligence for years, not only recently, but especially recent. Walid Daqqa finished his term, by the way. The ruling was that he would be in jail for 37 years, and that period finished, but they wouldn't release him. They kept him through new military orders, knowing that he's having cancer and that he needs urgent treatment and he needs to be with his family.
Imagine
but the most inhuman behavior was the fact that they did not allow his wife and his daughter, his only daughter, to visit him since the 7th of October. And while knowing that he was in terminal stage, just about to die, they refused to let them even come to his prison and say goodbye to him and see him for the last time.
An invading force.
That kind of behavior is
group of criminal crackhead.
And I think that's the nature of the
in the Gaza Strip of Egypt doing this bullshit.
Ben Gvir, this fascist minister of interior security who is in charge of prisons, Israeli prisons, declared that he is sorry
Stop.
that Walid Daqqa, this famous novelist and writer, and who specially wrote for children, he said that Ben Gvir said he was sorry that Walid Daqqa died because of cancer and was not executed by the Israeli military. This is the kind of mentality we have to deal with.
Gestapo.
And by the way, I mean, while we are talking, I have to really mention, I've just been recently able to visit some of the injured people from Gaza who are being treated in other countries. And these are not just numbers. When we say 75,000 people injured, there are 11,000 people in need to be treated outside because there is no treatment for them in Gaza, like the 10,000 cases of cancer. But the people who got out, I met some of them. One of them was a woman who lost her hand, lost her leg, lost her husband, lost her 2 children, 3 children actually, and now she's left alone. Another one lost her sight. A third one is now paraplegic because she was hit in the back, and so on and so forth. It's a terrible situation. And you know what hurts me a lot is that when 6 white people from Poland, Australia, and Britain were killed by the same Israeli army, and of course we are absolutely shocked that they were killed while they were trying to provide humanitarian aid. But because these 6 people who are internationals and not Palestinians, the whole world was up in arms and the United States was criticizing Israel. But we didn't see the same reaction to the 40,000 Palestinians killed so far, including almost 15,000 children. And including, by the way, the 7th person from this international group who was a Palestinian. I think this kind of discrimination and racism is something we should all stand up against.
That's right.
Because at the end of the day, what Palestinians want is very simple. We want freedom. We want self-determination.
They shouldn't have to
We want
ask
to be equal
for it.
to everybody.
They shouldn't have to ask
We
for
want to
it.
be treated
They were
as equal
there
human
before
beings.
the invading
And it
force.
is the duty and responsibility of every person in this world who believes in humanity to be on the side of the Palestinian people. This is not a time to be neutral or to ignore this terrible genocide that is taking place against the population of Gaza.
That's right.
Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, I want to thank you for being